if you have a circuit under load and you break the neutral connection, what happens is one half becomes 120 volts and is now a shock hazard. This kind of shock hazard is sometimes called a loaded neutral or a spicy neutral. And the conventional wisdom is a shock off a spicy neutral will hurt more than a shock off just a regular 120 volt wire. I'm here to say, at least according to my bench test and Ohm's law, the shock off a spicy neutral will hurt the same or less than a shock off a 120 volt live wire. Let's get into it. All right, first the control and the description of my bench test. I have a hot and a neutral that feed that receptacle, which feeds that hot plate. This amp probe or CT tells us the current on the circuit going to the hot plate. This CT tells us the current going across the parallel heat lamp. 0.2 amps when it's in parallel. Now I've set this up right here so I can break that neutral and run the heat lamp through there. And let's see what we get for current when the heat lamp is run in series with the hot plate. Okay, we're energized. And the neutral is jumped on that yellow wire to there. Runs through that CT and is right here waiting to make its connection. What will I get for amps? Some people say I'm going to get the full load of the hot plate. And that's not what Ohm's law says. So let's see what happens when I connect it. All right, moment of truth. 0.19 amps. Having a load upstream slightly lowered the amps. It certainly did not run 13 amps through the heat lamp. Let's look at the drawing on a series circuit. Okay, here are the two drawings. Go do the Ohm's law yourself. This is the heat lamp, which is 586 ohms, in parallel with the hot plate, which is 8 ohms. Do the math on what the current should be on both loads. Now, do the current when we have the hot plate that is 8 ohms in series with the heat lamp that's 586 ohms. This would not increase the load. All right? I'm sure everybody watching me knows how to do that Ohm's law, so I don't need to show it. So here's the flaw in the logic that I think is going to make it sink in for some people. What decides if something's a big load or a small load? Ohm's law says the lower the resistance, the bigger the load. The lower the resistance, the more amps. So the reason this hot plate draws more amps than the heat lamp is this is less ohms. This is only 8 ohms. The other one's 586. So then it would stand to reason, if the bigger the load, the worse the shock, then also the lower the resistance of the load, the bigger the shock. So if you're saying the bigger the load there, the worse the shock here on a broken neutral, you're also then saying the lower the resistance there, the bigger the shock here. So what is the way we can lower that resistance to the extreme of that logic? What would be plugged in there that has the lowest resistance we can do as electricians? A wire. And once the resistance of this load is at its extreme lowest, which would also be the extreme largest load it could be, we've gone back to just a parallel circuit, a regular shock. So what I'm saying is, the way to force this to the extreme is to remove this load entirely and just have it be a wire. Which is that? You're gone back to just a regular hot to neutral shock. Is the worst shock you can get. So why do people all have the memories that it gets worse to get hit when you're in series with the circuit than straight up parallel shock from a hot? Probably a whole nother video on that topic, but the short version is combination of being more startled and being more careless. When you're working near a live wire that you think is live or expecting to be live, which you shouldn't, but we do, you're being more careful. And, you know, maybe you working one-handed and you get zapped thumb to pinky and you're like, son of a, right? You're just a little aggravated. But when you're expecting the neutral to be dead and there's no live wires in the box, and you grab a hold of the yoke of the device next to the one you're working on with your right hand and completely ground your right hand and move it out of the way, and then you go in with your left hand to move the neutral out of the way at the same time, and now you just got belted straight across your chest, take the wind out of you. And they're like, holy crap, that neutral really got me good. But it's not just the neutral, it was you going in two-handed. You would feel the same shock if you grabbed the yoke with your right hand and grabbed a hot wire with your left hand. So combination of being more careless and creating the situation that we do get hurt worse. and we're more startled. But also, the other thing is a small load upstream will hurt less than a big load upstream, because the small load upstream adds 500 ohms to the 500 ohms of resistance to the circuit. So a small load hurts less than a big load, but a big load does not hurt more than no load, because like I just explained, no load is the extreme version of a large load. It's just the lowest resistance we can have in the circuit is no load. So that's what I think on why we have a memory of the neutral getting us worse. Side note, if you want to win a bar bet, it's not the neutral that's shocking you. You've never been shocked by a neutral. I can make another video on that. Also, that's my granddaughter making all the noise in the background. Beta. Dishes. And the next thing is, and tell me the bench test you want to see, is because this is where somebody could prove something different than I just said, which I don't see how, but I'd love to learn it. Get rid of just straight resistive loads. Get a motor involved. Get some nonlinear loads involved. Get something like that going on that is not just straight up ohms. But straight up ohms on a resistive load with Ohm's law, I think it's pretty clear. Having a load upstream does not intensify the shock. All right, thank you very much.